Hey everybody, Chris Burgos Elgato here. I wanted to do a deep dive into the Stream Deck Studio, which is the first pro product for live production. So the Stream Deck Studio is from the ground built for broadcast, that easy setup, that responsiveness, and that reliability that we need so much in these live production environments. And the versatility really allows it to accomplish a lot. And today we're going to go over how the Stream Deck Studio might fit into a broadcast environment, a live events, or a corporate AV space. Now, I want to point out that it is an IP-first Stream Deck compared to a lot of our traditional ones, which are USB-centric. And there are some interesting features with its scalability as well as the real-time feedback that we're really going to dive into today. So first, let's go over some of the features. It's a 19-inch rack mount interface. It's got 32 customizable keys, which gives you a lot of options to really set up different forms of control. These two knobs are dual multifunction encoders that can do a wide range of different functions. You could have it so that you actually change the layouts and button configurations on the front of the Stream Deck. Or you could have it do something more practical like control the volume or operate a different piece of the production independently. It's got an NFC reader that allows for accessing and profile management. And we're going to discuss how that might operate in different environments. And then finally, to expand on what's happening, it's got a front-facing USB port. So we can actually add a traditional Stream Deck in conjunction with the Studio. At a glance here, we can see the dimensions. It's not super deep. So you can actually put this in the front of a rack in conjunction with another piece of gear in the back. Here's the PoE Plus port. There's also two USB-C ports. So people coming from the traditional Stream Deck are more USB-centric. If they need to operate in that space, we have one for data and one for power. All of this is done its best with Buttons. Buttons is a software made by Bitfocus, and it is really designed to work in conjunction with the Stream Deck Studio. So I highlight Buttons for a couple of reasons. One, it's got a really slick UI design that is designed for these professional environments. It's a smart application, so it has a lot of things built into it to work with the switchers, the production setups, the routers, the cameras. A lot of that's just built into it, so it's easy to work with. And you can even version out multiple different parts of the studio or the environment with different Stream Decks and control it over one instance of Buttons. We sort of see here a slick animation that showcases what that looks like to what it translates into. And so really designed to work hand in hand here with the Stream Deck Studio as well as Buttons. In action, we can see Buttons here going through a production environment where we have multiple Stream Deck Studios in a rack on the left, and that Button software is above it, making all those custom configurations. And on the right, just like a general idea of what might be happening with some different manufacturers in conjunction with Buttons. And there are so many different pre-built connections in there that it's really slick. So that one server can operate on multiple different Stream Decks. Now that's different than what we traditionally do with our software. With our software, we are controlling one computer to one Stream Deck. But in this instance, you have one system being able to version a lot of different stations with different kinds of configurations. Stream Deck has evolved over the years, going from streamers into more professional spaces. And we started to see them grow from home offices, where people are doing more in their office space, whether that's Excel setups or Zoom. We actually see Stream Decks in control rooms today. So there'll be mission critical environments where they'll be using the Stream Deck. And then finally, the last piece we're going to talk about is how Stream Decks have gotten into broadcasts and more different kinds of environments. So the meat of what we're going to be talking about today is where does it fit? And we're going to address the broadcast environment, the live events environment, and the corporate environment. And as you can see, there's a lot of products from Elgato that might be able to fit in these spaces. When I think about these different kinds of productions, we think about how broadcast is working with these live events. There's those high-end cameras, these different kind of graphic solutions. There's all these feeds coming from different spaces versus our live events where we have a concert or esports tournament. And we're really focused on what's happening in the venue, what's on the board, what's the lighting looking like, how the audio cues are happening. But in the corporate space, we're actually focusing on a much simpler setup, right? We have a corporate town hall every month, and we need to control everything that's in that boardroom. Right now, there isn't a good solution prior to what we're doing with the Stream Deck Studio that kind of can service all of these guys. And as we go through, we're going to highlight how we might use Stream Deck. So let's talk about broadcast. In the broadcast space, engineers need interoperability. Every device comes from a unique family. So we can have routers from Blackmagic, Ross, Evertz, Grass Valley. I could have my production switcher from Blackmagic. I could have a vMix, the Viz TriCaster, a Ross Carbonite. My graphic stations are so varied today with software and hardware. And then there are multiple kinds of signals in our environment today, right? For every traditional SDI signal, we now have more IP signals. We're also recording, we're streaming, we're bringing in feeds from remote sites. And so none of these manufacturers makes a device that talks with everyone else. Almost exclusively, they're all really in their own ecosystem. And so when we look at Stream Deck Studio in these spaces, we say, well, what can we do? Well, now I can have a consolidated setup for my router control. If I have multiple different kinds of routers in my environment, let's say some for IP, some for baseband SDI, I can control them both from the studio. Some switcher control panels just don't fit our environments properly. So maybe we're in a small insert studio and we need some of that functionality. Well, Stream Deck Studio could come in and make that control happen. Also, I can have studios in multiple locations operating as different forms of control. As I discussed earlier, there's so many different kinds of graphics today that each interface is kind of unique. Well, now it's very easy to add graphics in using my studio. I am agnostic from any video workflow or audio workflow, so all that diversity can be routed or interacted with the studio. And because we have the ability to automate everything, you get a lot of power out of that one efficient platform. Let's look at a use case where we're talking to an engineer in charge. My engineer in charge has some very specific tasks that he wants to do in the broadcast. So he wants to be able to go to any rack and do routing control. Well, Stream Deck Studio would allow them to do that with the 32 keys. If I needed to replace certain kinds of controllers, maybe the hardware is aging and we just need something to get in the space right away, Stream Deck Studio fits really well in there. As I'm doing my multifunction encoders, I get to some unique environments where, hey, we're going to configure our workflow, but maybe in this space we have robotic PTZ cameras. Well, maybe I design it to work with all of the robos, or I can actually tweak the dial and say, hey, we're going to work with these particular cameras. Again, I could just approach the station and go through and change what that controller is doing. I'm not holding down a key. I'm not worried about some kind of interface in between. Everything's programmed and ready to go. Because we're doing all the programming, I can visually color code every button. So if I wanted to set up a morning show at the news station where everything is in bright blue, configure all the buttons to do that. When we switch to our afternoon sports, turn the dial, now everything's green. And so the users always know, hey, I'm working in the right environment because the buttons have been designed to work for me. With those NFC tags, we talked about the ability to switch profiles. Well, I think about different shows. I think about locking stations in environments where, hey, you know what? We're going to have each TD have their own NFC card. So when they tap into the studio, all of the features are ready to go. Everything that they're working with is just designed to happen because the studio is going to auto-populate the profile. And finally, we all love PoE. One cable gets me everything I need, whatever I'm doing. So PoE being built into the Stream Deck Studio is something that the engineer can say, oh, and it's easy to integrate to. Here we have an example of 3 Stream Deck Studios in our rack mount environment. And each one of these studios is operating independently, doing something differently. The image is a little small, but we have some doing recording. We have some doing camera selection. There's a lot of features, and each one of these is operating independently. So in action, our engineer in charge is routing cameras. They're setting up audio routes from working with remote callers. Maybe we're changing what's going to the switcher. We can also configure the studio lighting so that it's ready for the next show. And we get those different access to different kinds of operators via the control. And then once everything's set up, tap my NFC card, lock the system. We're all ready to go for our next show. Nobody can make some kind of change that might ruin the production. Stream Decks are often used in conjunction in these spaces. So we'll have, like for instance, in this image, we have 2 Stream Deck Studios, a Stream Deck XL, And then above there on the tablet is actually virtual Stream Deck. So if you purchase a Stream Deck, you have the ability to enable a tablet to act as a virtual Stream Deck. So really showing the whole ecosystem in action. And then this is a proof positive of what we're really saying here, which is here's a live production environment. The operator has a traditional control surface in front of them, but they're still using multiple Stream Decks throughout the environment for different stations, or even for their self to have a custom macro panel. And so when I think of what Stream Deck Studio does for live events, for live productions, broadcasts, it's really a great add-on to these workflows. Control rooms can be outfitted with Stream Decks, sports venues, and there's a lot of chances to be working with different kinds of groups. And so we can be working with these large-scale broadcasters. We can be working with insert studio setups, and we're typically going to be talking with those project manager engineers or engineers in charge about how we're looking at what Stream Deck Studio is capable of. And so we're looking at multiple racks or different kinds of setups, innovation being a big piece of what's happening. So hopefully this gives you a little taste of what it would look like looking at some of the customer base and saying, hey, we want to get a Stream Deck Studio in place. Well, here's a couple of ideas of what we've been working with. Pivoting from what we do in broadcast, the live event space is actually where Stream Deck took off. And that is in conjunction with what Bitfocus was doing. We started to see Stream Decks like the XL and the Mark II in a lot of spaces. Live events produce their own kind of chaos. They're their own set of needs, different from what we do in broadcast. So I'm working with audio consoles. I have different mics. There's speakers on stage. I have different switchers in my environment, a lot more software-based things. There's the LED wall, which needs to have its own video routed. There's all kinds of PTZ manufacturers in different environments in this space. And then I'm working with the lighting console. Well, I need this to all be timed. We've all been at one of these live events where someone's microphone wasn't muted, or the lighting wasn't set up properly, or the screens didn't change to be what we needed to. That timing is essential to making that live event really, really clean and well thought out as a production. Well, we could put a Stream Deck Studio here, and now we can have any team member control other elements of the production. So these are all your backup buttons in case something happens where the microphone is unmuted. We could have a dedicated button on anyone's controller, anyone's studio, and say, hey, look, we know mic 2 isn't muted, just push the button. We could have the control panels or different stations all set up for different kinds of video devices. Those lighting triggers, making sure all of that's happening. Again, we could have all that redundancy built into our setup at the engineering station, at the TD, even at the audio station, just a push of a button. And then today we're doing more streaming, more recording, we're adding more remote guests. We want all that timing in the production to be perfectly synced and ready. Stream Deck Studio gets into that position really well. And so we see some examples of live events here where people are actually using multiple Stream Decks in conjunction with their setup. This is very common to see, and different operators. This is a lecture on the left. This is a more traditional corporate event, or we've been at these setups where we're attending a conference or something like that, and you can see the operators just loaded up, making sure that they're controlling different things. Maybe it's the graphic station, maybe it's the switcher, maybe it's the Spotify playlist that they have injecting audio into the space. So let's just look at an example where we give the studio to our TD, right? Well, now our TD can quickly configure all their own sources, so they're not waiting on engineering to get them what they need routed. They can get their automation so that when the video changes over, we can trigger automation for the audio setup or what's going on in the projection. We can go through and just change the audio on a speaker, on a knob, go through and say, hey, here's my little speaker right next to me. I'm listening to a program. I need to turn it down a little bit. And then I could set up custom control profiles to be used throughout the event so that I could take a break, tag my card in with the NFC tag, set up the custom profile. Hey, you know what? We're going to go from a 5-speaker show to a 2-speaker show. This is ready. It's cameras 1, 2, and 3. You guys can operate this. It'll be really easy. Some live events companies are already incorporating Stream Deck Studio into their workflows. Newman & Mueller and Lion Productions are big fans of what we have going on. And they're doing them in different environments, whether it's more small scale or like the guys at Lion producing major concert setups. It's just simple and easy to incorporate. And actually, you can see with the operator on the left here, they built a custom setup where they have 3 Stream Deck Studios all stacked up on one another. So that small depth ends up being a big help when we're using these kind of productions. So we're looking at small production crews. We know that these guys typically are going to purchase with one of two things in mind. One, they're going to get some things incorporated for their next season of shows. Or two, we have a show that's pressing and we need something to get this job done. And so we also recognize that these small teams, as they get success, they start to build around Stream Decks, they're going to expand and they're going to work with different larger scale organizations. And so the idea to go from something that's going to be on a desk to being part of all of the rolling racks is really appealing in how we position Stream Deck Studio. And we're starting to see more organizations incorporating multiple Stream Decks. So some studios as well as some XLs so that different stations can do different things. You're going to be working with project managers, with technical directors, with engineering. All different members of these live events productions may be coming to you guys, and hopefully you can get a good sense of, well, we could probably do this with the Stream Deck Studio. Last but not least, and certainly the space where I don't think we're thought of traditionally, but there's a lot of opportunities in the corporate AV space. So corporate AV has a different set of needs. Typically, someone high up on the food chain in the C-suite says, hey, last year was good, we need this year to be great. And that then puts some pressure on the AV team. The AV team has a lot of weird things they're going to be juggling, from what's happening audio-wise in the boardroom, what's happening PTZ camera-wise, but also what about the displays in the entire facility? Some of these large-scale corporate installs have displays on every single floor and every single wall, and the AV team is responsible for managing what content goes there. Combo that with the fact that the actual user in the given boardroom might have a wide range of skills. These are not production professionals, they just need an easy button. And then we have events happening every day, every month, and it all needs to be the exact same, and it needs to be the same at every location. That's where Stream Deck and the Elgato line really comes into play, with the Stream Deck Studio saying, hey, the AV team behind the scenes, I know you guys are in like an IT closet, here's the studio, configure the boardroom so it's good to go. But then we can put a more traditional Stream Deck like a Mark II or an XL actually in front of the people in the boardroom. So when Jim needs to share a screen, hit the share screen button. We need to mute somebody, there's a mute button. And so we're actually looking at the full environment and how they want to do control. So whether that's what's going on in the displays or the blinds, you could have the Stream Deck sort of power to have that all happen. And because we adopt this mindset to sort of get everything on Stream Deck, I can go to the HQ, I can go to a remote location all throughout the globe where my corporate setup is. I can be pushing Stream Deck and saying, hey, we're going to get that reliability. This is really where the roots of us being for content creators and streamers really comes forward, because we're easy and approachable even for someone who might not be traditionally running a production. So we can get the AV lead with the studio and some XLs, getting the whole room configured, get the cameras ready, make sure all the mics are set up properly, get the displays, change the blinds and the lighting, and then, hey, you know what? We got a remote caller coming in. One button, get everything set up. And then any team member could go through and operate, hey, we need to raise someone's volume. Here's a button to raise the volume. We can see Stream Deck here used in a couple of professional environments and, Pro AV environments. And you can see that these aren't your traditional production facilities. One of these is sort of jammed in behind the wall in a live auditorium. The other one's sort of like been makeshift on a desk or a table they popped up. That's the beauty of using Stream Decks in these environments, is that because of their form factor and because of the fact that we can have multiple of them operating, you can do a lot in these retrofitted spaces that we see for Pro AV and these corporate workflows a lot more often, where, you know what, we don't have a traditional production facility, we got to make it work. Using a Stream Deck's really easy there. We went through a lot of different things here today, and I wanted to tackle those three sort of pillars of how we're pushing Stream Deck in the professional environment. But here's what you need to remember. If you get no other ideas, this is the one slide, this is the one concept you should remember. Why do we want to go with Stream Deck? It's their controls for their systems. There's no limitation on what gears we can work with. It's configurable per show, per workflow. I get that constant visual feedback when I'm operating it. and it's very simple to train on and easy to expand. Inevitably, the customers are going to look at less wasted time and less errors so that they get those happier outcomes. Their productions run smoothly. Today was a deep dive into the way Stream Deck fits into these more pro AV, these more broadcast-centric workflows. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this. Please reach out if you have any questions. The team at Broadfield is knowledgeable. They have access to me as well. And we are growing and expanding what's happening at Elgato, both from a product perspective as well as personnel. So you're going to see more and more from us as the year comes. And looking forward to working with some of you guys in these major installs. Thank you.